As he mentioned, as Rabbi Ezra mentioned, on Monday night, we begin observance of Eichah, 24-hour fast that, not of Eichah, of Tisha B'Av, that commemorates the destruction of the temples, the ancient temples in Jerusalem, and really is our day of mourning for not just the destruction of the temples, but all the long, long years of exile and loss and suffering since then. And in fact, in the rabbinic imagination, the tragedy goes even further back to the time of the golden calf. On Monday night, we read the book of Eichah, which in English is called Lamentations, but the word Eichah does not mean lamentations. It doesn't mean to lament. Does anyone know what that word means? So it's a very literary word. It's not a kind of word you would use in casual speech, but I put it in the title of the source sheet in Hebrew so you could see how it's spelled. If you drop the hey, and it's just aleph yud chaf, it becomes eich, which is a very common word. Eich means how. And it's, all over the place in modern Hebrew and biblical Hebrew. How do you do this? How are you doing? Eich. You add the hey, and it becomes this sort of rhetorical how, a kind of a throwing up of the hands. How could this be? And you don't actually expect an answer. That's what Eichah means. And it's only used, and it's not a super rare word. It actually appears, I think, 17 times in the Bible, in Tanakh. Appears only 4 times in the Torah, five times in the Torah, all of which are in the book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, which we begin today. And the first one is in today's Torah portion. And the rabbis arranged it so we would always read today's Torah portion on the Shabbat of Tisha B'Av. So we hear the word Eichah in the Torah portion as we're getting ready to read the book of Eichah on Monday night. And then they also chose a haftarah from the book of Isaiah that also includes that word Eichah. Again, this sort of rhetorical how, the throwing up of the hands, a kind of desperate, lonely how. And what I'd like to do today is take you through each of the liturgical appearances of the word Eichah from this week and talk about how they feel so relevant today. So we're going to start with those verses that Rabbi Ezra read with us. And it's the first source on the page. I have a rule for myself. I try to only hand out one piece of paper. So I didn't include the Hebrew for this one. But if you want to follow along in the Hebrew, it's on page 984 in the book. As we just heard, Moses is recounting the very beginning of their time of wandering the desert. I said to you at that time, I cannot bear the burden of you by myself. Imagine, by the way, imagine a leader getting up and saying, I can't bear the burden of you. I mean, imagine a parent saying that. Those are hard words. Your God, Adonai, has multiplied you until you are today as numerous as the stars in the sky. May Adonai, the God of your ancestors, increase your numbers 1,000-fold and bless you as promised. And here I'll read the Hebrew. Eicha esa levadi torchachem umasachem v'rivchem. How can I alone bear your burden, your trouble, and your bickering? There's a strange tension here. Right, so the middle 2 verses show that Moses is acknowledging that there's been a promise fulfilled. Right? God promised that you would be numerous, and this is a blessing. And after all, what organization doesn't want to grow? and in fact, he says, and may we continue to grow. May you continue to grow. Lots of people. We want lots of people. And as we grow, something happens. Then we stop knowing each other. Then there becomes an anonymity in our interactions, and then people even become interchangeable with one another. So it's a tension. It's not good, it's not bad, it's a tension. And then that word Eichah. Look at what Rashi has to say on verse 12. I actually found this kind of jaw-dropping. Your burden, right? Moses causes them a burden, a trouble, and he refers to them as bickering. Moses' use of this word teaches us that the Israelites were troublesome. If one of them perceived that his opponent in a lawsuit was about to win the case, he would say, I have witnesses to bring. I have evidence to bring. I'm adding more judges. This is an 11th century biblical commentator. And how frighteningly contemporary does it describe of, like, what kind of litigious society did he live in? Rabbi Benny Lau, who is a contemporary, very popular Israeli rabbi, educator, very emotionally insightful. He makes a really good point here. There were more than 600,000 Israelite men, and that was just the men. So many people. And Moses feels that he is alone. He says twice, I cannot bear the burden alone. Livadi is the Hebrew. And on one level, this is just the loneliness of a leader who can never be part of the people. But that word Eichah is inherently a lonely word. And you don't actually have to be a leader to feel the loneliness that Moshe is feeling. I think it's the loneliness we feel when we contemplate problems that just feel too big to solve. And suddenly we feel small and helpless, not in a good way. And I'm going to enumerate some of them that I'm feeling right now. The fear for the future of our democracy. The fear of the natural disasters that are befalling our world at an alarming rate. The fear for the future of Israel. And here I'm going to add one that I carry on a more personal way. Fear, I'm going to get more specific. The fear for Hirsch Goldberg Poland, a sweet, brown-eyed young man who was taken hostage by Hamas 307 days ago. The fear for the children and the families and the elders living in Gaza as their buildings and their world fall into rubble around them. You don't have to be Moses to feel the weight of these problems and want to cry out in loneliness, Eichah, how can it be? What can we do? That's the Eichah of our Torah portion. It's the lonely anxiety of a troubled world. The feeling that there are things beyond our control that are terrible. The Haftarah describes something a little different, I think. In my mind, it describes, and I'll read it, a portion in a moment, it describes the consumerism, the denialism, the hedonism, the self-defeatism that can often follow on the heels of that loneliness. So this is source 3 on your sheet from our Haftarah today. Eicha hayta lizona kirya ne'emana. How has the faithful city become a whore? She who was filled with justice, where righteousness dwelt, is now filled with murderers. Your silver is turned to tarnish, your wine is cut with water, your rulers are rogues and cronies of thieves. Everyone loves bribes and is greedy for gifts. They don't judge the case of the orphan, and the widow's cause never reaches them. The orphan and the widow exemplify the individuals who do not have the resources to defend themselves, and so are dependent on those in power to protect them. And I cannot tell you how often in my work as a rabbi, people have just broken down in tears in my office telling me about the court case that cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and they have righteousness on their side and they cannot get the attention of the judge. And in multiple different domains. The orphans and the widows' causes never reach them. Their the pursuit of wine and silver and bribes and greeds, it's like there's this hole in their soul. And the more they try to fill it with the pleasures and the wealth and the power, the deeper and deeper the hole becomes. That's the zonah, the whore that Isaiah describes, beautiful Jerusalem. And then on Monday night, we're going to read Eichah, which is just this devastating picture of genocide, of destruction, of a people decimated and taken slave, and it's our people. It's our people. And that's source 4 on the sheet. Don't worry, I'm not going to leave you here. Eichah yashva badad ha'ir rabat am. How does she sit alone? The city once thronged with people has become like a widow. Noble among nations, princess among provinces, she has become a forced laborer. Bitterly she weeps in the night, her cheek wet with tears. For all who love her, there is none to comfort her. All of her friends have betrayed her. They have become her foes. That theme of there is none to comfort her just repeats over and over through Eichah, through the book of Eichah, that feeling of absolute loneliness. Now, if the Torah portions Eichah, Moses is saying, how can I bear you? And the Haftarah portions Eichah, kind of, why are you taxing all this money and not doing right by the orphan and the widow? If those feel like a description in its own way of our reality today, the Eichah that we're building up to of lamentation, that is our nightmare. That is what we've seen in the past, and that at some level we all know could yet happen, but nobody knows if it will or will not. We're standing there afraid of it. And what our tradition tells us is it's never too late. It's certainly not too late now to stop it. And so the question is, how do you stave off Eichah? How do you stave it off? And Rabbi Ezra gave us the beginning of an answer. It's in the answer in our Torah portion. Absolutely, the first thing you do is what Moses did. You reach out to build bridges. And that's the fifth source on our sheet. So I took your tribal leaders, wise and experienced men, and appointed them heads over you. Don't do this alone. You might feel like you're alone, but you're not. It may feel like the problem is way too big for 1 or 10 or 100 of us, but working together, that's how we're going to make a difference. But it's not enough just to build relationships. Moses builds the relationships with ethics and values at the center. I'm continuing in source 5. You shall not be partial in judgment. Hear out low and high alike. So low, that's the orphans and the widows, those who cannot afford your judgment. Fear neither party, for judgment is God's. And any matter that is too difficult for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it. You're not alone. I'm with you, he's saying. If Moses was dealing with the pettiness of his time, of his generation, he puts as the primary value justice and asks his partners to reach above the pettiness for God's truth. The next source on our page is from a woman who is dealing with much worse than pettiness. She's dealing with violent hatred. Violent hatred. And she too is reaching out all over the world tirelessly to build bridges and placing values at the center of those bridges. Values that she's placing are the values of compromise and shared humanity. And that's Rachel Goldberg, who's the mother of Hirsch Goldberg Poland that I mentioned earlier, who's being held hostage in Gaza. And it happens that the reason I am so focused on Hirsch is because Rachel and her husband, John Poland, went to school with me. They were 3 years older than I was. It's a small Jewish day school. We all each other from my kindergarten year till their 12th grade year. We were in the same little community. So, should it matter that I knew them personally? Should it matter that I can remember how crazy in love Rachel was with John when they were high school seniors? Should it matter that the hostages are our people and the casualties in Gaza are not? Whether it should or should not matter, I can tell you that for me it does. For me it does. But look at what Rachel says. I will tell you, I have 3 quotes from Rachel. The first one is from October 23rd. She's speaking to the United Nations. When you only get outraged when one side's babies are killed, then your moral compass is broken and your humanity is broken. And therefore, in your quiet moments alone, all of us everywhere on planet Earth need to really ask ourselves, do I aspire to be human? Or am I swept up in the enticing and delicious world of hatred? This is not a unique phenomenon to Israel or Gaza. This is everywhere on our planet. I understand that hatred of the other, whoever we decide that other is seductive, sensuous, and most importantly, it's easy. Hatred is easy. Now, as I said, she was speaking on October 23rd, so the invasion of Gaza had just barely begun. And even before it had begun, people were already saying, I can't even say it, it's so horrible, that they deserved it, right? They were oppressors. So when she says, if you don't get outraged, if you only get outraged when one size babies are killed, she's talking about our babies. That they didn't care that our babies were killed. But then she spoke to the United Nations again in December. And her message didn't change, but there was a shift. And I will tell you that every time she speaks, of course, the hostages are the primary thing on the agenda. And of course, her own son is front and center. But the second time that she spoke to the United Nations, she shared a poem she had written for a mother in Gaza. And a specific mother. She didn't say her by name, but she said she knows who she is. And she talked about their friendship. And here's a quote from that speech. We can keep dividing the world into the paradigm of them versus us, or we can start thinking about those who are willing to compromise and those who are not willing. There are people all over the world who are willing, not because they're naive or foolish. It's because they want their children to live in a world that doesn't exist right now. And so they have the courage to be willing to do things that are terrifying and uncomfortable. And finally, I have one more short little Rachel Goldberg quote that I say to myself now multiple times a day. And I hope you will too. Hope is mandatory. Hope is mandatory. I'm going to conclude with one more teaching from Rav Benny Lau, that wonderful Israeli rabbi. Our Haftorah today that talked about the harlots, talked about Jerusalem as a city of harlots, was from Isaiah. 12 chapters later, Isaiah offers a message of hope. And it includes this very famous line, our last source on the page, Ushaftem mayim bisason mimaynei Yeshua. You shall draw water with joy from the fountains of deliverance, or from the well springs of salvation. And Rav Benny says, if you've ever dug a well or seen a well being dug, you know it's a lot of work. You have to dig down through the dry, parched earth. And when you start digging, you don't know how far you're going to have to go before you hit water. And that's what we have to do to find hope, is what he said. We need to dig through the layers of fear and anger and hatred and the dried up parts of ourselves that have stopped caring altogether because it's too overwhelming. We have to dig through the loneliness, through the Eichah, and push through as much work as it is until we get to those waters of hope. to find the waters of hope, because hope is mandatory. Shabbat Shalom. We'll conclude with a mourner's Kaddish on page 111. Yitgadal v'kadash merabah, v'yama divrach yurteh, v'yamlich malchuteh, v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol bet Yisrael, v'gala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehe shmei rabah mevorach le'olam omei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. Vitadar, vitale, vitalal, shmei kudsha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran b'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru. Amen. Wish you comfort and good memories. Do you have announcements? Well, I know that one announcement is come to Eichah on Monday night. And Yesher Koach Michael, Yesher Koach Rabbi Ezra.
Never stand between your congregation and Kiddush. Adon Olam's on page 112. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra le'ed nasa v'chefzo kol azay melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kiklot hakol levado yimlok nora v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yiyeh v'tifara Vehu echad ve'ein sheni lehamshilo lehachvira v'li reshit v'li tachlit v'lo haoz v'hamisra vehu eli v'chai goali v'tzorche li ve'etzara vehu nisi umanos li menat kosi ve'yom ekra ve'yado af kiruchi ve'ishan ve'aira ve'imruchi gviati Adonai li velo ira velo ira velo ira velo ira. Let's stand. Let's stand for Yes.
Al ken berach Adonai yom HaShabbat v'yikadshehu savri. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. L'chaim, let's make motzi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam
Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.
Shabbat
Good
shalom.
Shabbos to everyone online. Linda, Ed and Sandra, it's good to see you. Stephanie.
Shabbat
Hello,
shalom.
March. Hello, Diane. Hello,
shalom.
Melissa. Hi, Lori. Amber. Good Shabbos, everyone. Scotty.
Shalom, everybody.
Good to see everyone. Good Shabbos.
Stephanie, Shabbat Shalom.
Good Shabbos.
Diane, yeah. Hey, thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Hi, sorry.